All right, PTSD, it's the big one. We've all got it, apparently, and it's the number one issue of, suicides and crisis in the veteran community, the police world, et cetera, et cetera. And it is a big problem, but I do not think it is the big problem. And I talk about this, relatively extensively in my presentations, especially in the first one, where I try to dispel some of the myths around this personal crisis journey. I really don't think that PTSD is the main issue. I think inherently the people we are that get attracted to jobs like this, we've already got somewhat of a laundry list of personal issues from childhood relationships, neurological conditions, ironic, like ADHD, for example, and there's probably a sprinkling of autism in there as well. So I don't think PTSD is the issue, and I want to talk very, very briefly about my experience with PTSD. So, 7 years ago when I went through my crisis, that's when I started the process to get compensated through DVA for, my injuries and whatnot whilst I was in the military. And obviously I was at the height of my crisis, so the mental health component of that was the biggest one that they wanted to look at the time. And at that time, I didn't have a lot of the physical injuries, at least to the extent that I do now, for a variety of reasons. So they looked into the PTSD one and they said, yep, you got PTSD. And that was one of the things that they compensate me for. It's on my DVA file. However, I've never received a diagnosis from a psychiatrist for post-traumatic stress disorder. I officially do not have PTSD. Now, maybe I do, maybe I don't. I still maintain that I don't, right? Now, the big thing for me about PTSD is that it is a disorder. So it's not like, you've got some strong emotions towards a particular event in your career or in your life. And it's not, I don't think it's the Hollywood thing that we get it made out to be, like apocalypse now, like, punch in the mirror and like, freaking out in your room. And I don't think it's often things like nightmares and flashbacks. And in my experience, let's just say, purely for argument's sake, if in this video, let's just say I've got PTSD, right? I've never experienced any of those issues, right? I've never experienced flashbacks. I've never had specific nightmares about deployments or anything in the military. I've had lots of nightmares, but it was around anxiety about my daughters or my life, or things like being in military situations where I've forgotten a whole bunch of things, right? Because that did happen to me in my career a couple of times. So the classic, typical movie type PTSD, I don't have it. But if we're looking at PTSD, it's post-trauma. So trauma is not just one incident, two incidents, it's accumulative. And you can get PTSD from all sorts of things: car crashes, childhood, physical, sexual abuse, relationships, being physically injured or hurt, life-threatening situations, all that type of stuff, right? So if I did have PTSD, and for argument's sake in this video I've got it, I think my PTSD would just be the fact that my body has gone through a whole bunch of elevated periods of, high cortisol, high adrenaline, and I've had to adjust to certain situations, whether it be in the military, overseas, or through childhood or whatever it is, through these stressful situations, and that my body has then remembered that I've got that highly elevated central nervous system, fight, flight, freeze sort of response. And that at very specific times, or if I'm overstimulated by a variety of different things, then that's when something like that can manifest. So I don't think I have what is the classic or the typical PTSD where I'm waking up having nightmares and, jumping over bushes if I hear a loud noise. But if I were to have any sort of PTSD, it would be that. It would just be the physiological and biological and chemical effects of being in a variety of different circumstances throughout my entire life, right? Childhood, teenage years, military, and even since then. So the PTSD thing's a difficult one for me to swallow because I don't like to accept that maybe I do have it, because if I do have it, it's not, in my mind, the cool Hollywood version. It's just my version. So if I do have it, don't have it, I kind of don't give a shit, because I understand what my experience is, and I understand that where my issues come from, and I understand how to solve them. So more of a rant, this video, than anything potentially constructive, but I think that we need to have a look at this PTSD narrative, and even you as an individual need to have a look at this PTSD diagnosis or PTSD situation and decide if you've got it. And if you do have it, maybe it's not quite the way that you thought it was going to be.